Hey Tony, it's Tuesday. First off, to answer your question of the week, I don't know. I feel like I'd probably like I think a couple ones I sent you before would be like that bounty hunter one that I did with like Din, Armorer, maybe like a Bo-Katan and I don't know, maybe like a Gar Saxon on there as well or Sabine Wren. I don't know. I feel like that'd be kind of fun. Do like a full Mandalorian one, or the alternative I'd do like a Republic one probably with maybe like Anakin and Obi Wan because I really like the way both of them played when you and I did that one game with maybe I don't know like a with a Plo Koon and I don't know going from there. So there's my answer to that question. So what I want to talk about this week is we're getting back to politics and more so. So about a month ago, one of my favorite podcasts, which is Dear Hank and John, which definitely recommended. It's Hank and John Green, who are both, good authors, good vloggers, and just all around wonderful people. Ended up on their podcast talking about, so for some context on this. So John Green and Hank Green also created Crash Course. And in the early seasons of Crash Course, because John Green did the history and the literature parts of it, he had a sticker on his computer that basically said this machine kills fascists. And so that was actually a callback to Woody Guthrie, who was a fantastic musician. The man who did This Land Is Your Land was Woody Guthrie. And on his guitar, he had written on it, This Machine Kills Fascists. And that was something that really kind of, it really resounded for many people on that, particularly those who do fancy themselves as like, anti-authoritarian and things like that. And for a long time, John Green kept it on his computer until he ended up getting a new computer, and he was like, "I did not put that sticker back on there," and it brought up to a good conversation of, sorry, I have a bit of a cold. Brought up to a good conversation of, does this machine still kill fascists? Meaning, does the computer, does information, does modern day information tech, does that kill fascism? Does it allow to a more educated populace? And if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely 100%. I thought that, I remember commenting many times before, in the age of information, being ignorant is a choice. And I was naive, as were Hank and John. And none of us and many others did not quite think of the ramifications on that easy access to information. Now, I still think, a well-informed society is what you need in order to maintain society, particularly a democratic society. But we're seeing now, especially in the age of social media, the age of AI, the age of, 24-hour news cycles, the age of oligarchy that, former President Biden called it. We live in an oligarchy now, and I think that's completely true, as we've seen over the past couple of days. But it brought up a good discussion on, does a greater access to information, does that help stop authoritarianism? And I think we have to say no. No, it doesn't. And even like looking historically, as I am wont to do, I love looking at history because I feel like, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And many of the same things that people were facing, way back when are very similar, at least in a sense, to what we're facing today. The names change, the technology changes, but history and society, pretty much follows patterns. And, it's generally like, at the very simplistic form, it's rise, precipice, fall, collapse. And I kind of mentioned that in my previous video with the Bronze Age collapse. But one thing that is always constant is when more people get more access to information, things change drastically. I mean, you can look back to when writing was first made, way back in the ancient times. Writing then resulted in more propaganda and resulted in wars, certainly there, until society kind of got the grasp on writing. One of the best examples was the printing press. The printing press came out before the Protestant Reformation, and that was one of the big startups for the Protestant Reformation was Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press, because it gave information to a much larger group of people who didn't previously have it. Before he made the printing press, pretty much all writing was done by your clergy, and your clergy and your high and your social elites. And the printing press completely changed that. Now anybody in theory could read, could write, could pass on information. And it directly led to one of the most violent centuries in world history, especially at least modern world history. I think it's arguably the second most violent century behind just the 20th. The 20th is only violent because of World War One and Two, but like the 100 years after the printing press was made, it was invented. You had the 30 Years' War, which was tragic. You had the 9 Years' War. You had so many other wars. You had the wars between Spain and England, because this information was able to pass on to more and more people, and a lot of people use that to gather information to increase knowledge, and others used it to shove their snake oil, for the lack of a better term. And we see a similar thing with the invention of the radio. The invention of the radio had a big impact on World War II. The invention of telegraphs was a major part of World War One, because it allowed for more information. Like video screens allowed for a lot more propaganda for World War One, and it ramped up the international dialogue to really push it to an age of war. And I think we're kind of seeing something very similar, if rather different, in the internet, in social media, and everything like that, because now almost everyone in the world who has access to the internet now also has access to all the information and misinformation you could ever want. And you have a lot of people who use that to better society, and you have those who use it to enrich themselves. And I think we're seeing, particularly with the second Trump presidency, now I know it's only 2 days old, but a lot of his rise to power could be harkened back to the way social media drastically changed. So I was not an early adopter of social media. I didn't really get into it until 2010, whereas I think it really kind of came into play in like 2005, 2006. I think maybe even 2004, because that was when MySpace was a thing. But Facebook and Twitter, because in this house we dead name the bird, but Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and all these other social networks that kind of advanced from the information, not renaissance, but the massive informational change that we've been facing over just you and I's life. And there are people who are using that to push propaganda, push positions, push alternative facts. And we as a society, we as humanity, have not really figured out a way to combat that. And it's not going to be an easy process. And quite frankly, I think it won't surprise me if it's another 20, 30, even 40 years until things kind of stabilize and we kind of advance in our morality with the same sense that social media is today. So that's something that I think you've seen throughout history, is like these massive societal changes occur with this massive technology increase, this massive information increase, and everything kind of goes from there. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen. I don't like living in interesting times, but here we are, so we better make do with what we can. So Tony, my question for you is, how are you using social media now? I know I personally am kind of not really doing much. I think really the only social media that I use for the most part is Reddit, just because I like seeing posts and things like that from the communities I enjoy. But I just use Facebook to share memes, and I never got a Twitter. So how are you changing your digital diet? Tony, I'll see you on Friday. Later, bro.